Okay. All right. So, like I said, I'll be taking us through introduction to API testing with Postman. And okay, so the content of this entire section today, we just talk about the introduction to API testing using, of course, a testing tool called Postman. We'll be discussing what is Postman and the entire we'll be discussing what is Postman, what Postman is about. We'll be looking at the importance of API testing. We're also going to be discussing some basic features and user interface overview of how Postman look when you already have the application running on your system. And we're going to be discussing our HTTP methods that are being used in Postman when we're testing all of our APIs. We're also going to look at a sample view of an API post request, right? I want to go into a lot of nitty-gritty, so I'll just run us through some of the tiny bits so we are not lost. And of course, we're going to be looking at how to understand the responses that we get, and of course, our response codes in course of the test. So I'm going to get right into it. First thing first, what is API? So we're hearing about APIs, API. Now let's get down to it. API means application programming interface. Now the purpose of an API is it is a set of rules and communication methods that allow different software components to interact and exchange data. So just in a very down to earth explanation. So for your phone, let me talk about your banking app right now. On your app, when you go to your banking app, of course you have to log in. So you're using like your username and then your password. So when you log in with your username and your password, you're sending a particular form of request, which are in this application, which are in this API form. You're sending it to a server, right? And with that, you get a response. So that like, oh, good morning, Jane. What can we do for you today? So you're seeing your account balances and all that on your app. So that form of communication uses what they call APIs, right? To send those requests and then to get your form of reaction and responses that you need. So when you enter your email and then your password, you're communicating to a database. Okay, so this is me, my email and my password, and database responding with you coming now, allowing you to come into the app. So that's like a basic understanding of what APIs and all of their flow means. So yeah, I've also added like, so I'll go with 2 layer. This should be like a 3 layer model, but I didn't want to complicate the entire flow. So first thing first, your banking app on your phone is your user interface. That's the UI. That's just the entire UI of your app that you could see. Right now, the business layer where all of the logic are processed, all of the transaction, of course, that is where the API testing and everything is performed. That is where the APIs are really functional. Now, I've also gone there down to say that testing your user interface is very beneficial because, of course, you're testing from all of the buttons that you click on your app. You're clicking on the login button. You're clicking on a field where you can enter your email, and of course, a field where you can enter your password. But all of this testing your via interface cannot be performed till the end of a design process. So it means that for you to be able to click on your bank app, right, enter your name and then your password, if your design process, if your design planning, right, your Figma designs and everything already, you can't do that. But API testing can definitely be performed at an early stage of software design process. So we don't need to wait till we see the end product where we have our web interaction, the interface where we can do everything, the beautiful designs, the colors. We don't have to wait to that point. We can start our testing right from when it is early, when all the APIs are built. You know, the APIs are the ones that send all of this communication, like I previously said. So at that communication part, at that basic part, early part, we can start integrating, we can start working and performing all of our APIs testing. So next, I'll be describing what Postman is. So Postman is a unified platform. It is a tool. It is an application that is used to designing APIs, documenting your APIs, and then testing those APIs. So Postman, the developers, they work with Postman. So with Postman, they create all of the APIs, of course, by linking into their codes, and then you can see they're like, oh, so Postman, so the developers have all of their APIs created via Postman, and of course, have the documentation on an API still added to Postman. And we as a testers, we use same Postman to test those APIs. Now, what are the importance of API testing? One, API testing ensures that the application can communicate effectively, which reduces risks and exposure. So, like I mentioned, down to your banking app, that is a communication. You're sending the data right to the database, and the database is fetching your details. So imagine if you want to get into your banking app and you do not log in. the application and the system will not recognize you. So you're not going to be seeing your name customized. Oh, Jane, welcome. Good morning today. You're making a transaction from your app to somebody else's so another account balance. You're saying that, oh, specify, maybe schedule like a transaction, or maybe group like a transaction. You're seeing all those communication that the application brings out to you. They're all be done via APIs. So when we test our APIs early, it reduces a lot of risks and exposures, right, when we get to our production environment. And another thing about API testing is it helps us to identify issues at early stage of development cycle. So like I previously mentioned, we're not waiting till the entire UI is beautiful, you are clicking on the buttons. You can identify those early stage, all those issues at the very, very early stage with your API testing. Your thorough API testing, you can figure out all of your security issues, you're figuring out all of your functional issues, non-functional issues, all of that, ensuring that your applications perform very well when it's not fully built. We can figure out all of those issues at an early stage of development cycle by testing our APIs thoroughly. And another thing that API testing helps us eliminate, helps us to do, it saves time and cost of late discovery. So imagine we APIs are not properly tested, and of course it is integrated. Your banking app is there. So I'm coming to your app now. Let's say, okay, I'm holding Toby's phone, and then I'm opening, let me say, no, that would be a complicated kind of example. I don't want to complicate things, but you're going into your app, right? Your banking app, and you're trying to like send money, but you realize that on your app, you're seeing Jane, you're seeing your account number is different, and then the account name there is showing Jane Abasa, which is my data. That is a big issue on production, which means you have access to my money, which you should not be. So all of those issues and discovery that we can get on production, it is easily eliminated when we pick up our API testing at a very, very early stage. So now I'll just walk us through some bits of the interface of API of your Postman, how your Postman look, right? So like I said, I didn't want to complicate things so much, so I've just highlighted a few. Now, when you get your Postman downloaded, you create an account. Of course, it's free. It's not like you have to pay for it. You're going to have a workspace where you join in your workspace. Now, in your workspace, you'll be seeing tabs like this. I'll just describe a few of them. Here, you can see your collections on the side, environment, history, flows. Let's go to the easier one where you can add a request. So now on that new request flow, there's a tab here where I wrote like a request name. So request name means your API has to be titled. All APIs are usually titled. It's titled to something. It's titled to a particular action. So let's go with creating account. So my request name here, where I have the new request, can be create account, which means I'm trying to create a user. First thing, let's make it very easy. When you registered for this mentorship program, I know you entered a couple of data in it, right? So let me imagine, just tell you that that is an API. Let me tell you it's an API code, not imagine, but let me put it here. So yeah, I'm going to say the title of this request is registration for Tech Bro mentorship program, right? 4.0. That will be the name of our API request. Now, on this other point that states HTTP method, there are different methods that are being used on Postman to either put in on APIs, via APIs, either putting data and to get data. So here you have to select, there's a drop down here, which I'll be showing us in other screens, where you can select your HTTP method that you're trying to, that the API that you're trying to do the function of that API. So let's say create, right? So you're selecting an HTTP method from here that says post. Then we have another feed called where you see that enter your URL or paste your text. I've highlighted it there as the API URL. There's always a URL that will be given to you, a base URL, a path. So a base URL is the common website URL, but a path is what is this trying to do? So /create or /product means I need to create a product. So at that base URL that is given to you, this is the field where you pass in your base URL. That's two. Then here, I've also highlighted the field called authorization, where I say the user permission. Now, for every action on API testing, users have to be permitted to carry out every form of actions. So these are part of the security things that you can even find out while you're testing your APIs. You can say, oh, for a user who doesn't have an admin permission to create a user, to create sub-users, right? If they come here to try to create a user, they should get an error, right? So now that authorization that an admin should have, like a token that permits an admin to create a users, you pass it in here. That's a section where you have to enter your user authorization. Then there's also a part code for the request body. There you have to pass in like the data and everything that you're trying to create into the DB. So let me just move here. So yes, like I mentioned on the HTTP request section where you have like method. So this is the diagram just to my right here. You can see there's a drop down. That drop down shows all of the HTTP methods on Postman. It's easy. It's all inbuilt. You don't have to formulate it. You don't have to think about it. They just need to tell you what the API does, and then you pick an HTTP method that you're trying to achieve. You can see there's a get, there's a post, there's a put, patch, delete, and of course options. Yeah. So the other screen here, I'll just be walking us through what all of these HTTP methods means in layman language. So first, I will go with the post called create. So you can see that the method is a post. The function is a create function. Don't bother yourself about the meaning of create right now, but it's a create. So every time you're on Postman and you select an HTTP method called post, it means you're trying to create new data. The data does not exist. You're trying to put it in there. That's new, right? So it's a create request. It's the create method. It's a create functionality. And you can send an example of the URL like know your base URL has a slash API slash v1 slash products, which means you're trying to create a new product. So the other one here I'm talking about is the get method. So get means like its name, you're trying to fetch something, just get me something. I'm telling you to go get me my contact list. So on your phone, when you go on your phone and you click on contacts and then you're fetching for a contact name and you're going with like Jane, you can see that it always fetches, it brings out the list of contact that you have under Jane with the name saved as Jane, and then you can now pick a particular one. So that is a request called a get method, which is what Postman also does for us while we're testing. So you're fetching a particular user with an ID, you're fetching a particular product with an ID. So I've also passed in, there's also like an example of how the API path will always be, you're passing an ID and then you're fetching a particular record. Then the other method here is a put method. So what a put method does, it helps you to update an existing method. So for example, you previously created a contact called Jane Abasa, and you want to update that contact information on your phone. When you go to your contact list and you're editing, when you edit and then you're changing, let's say Jane, you have another Jane on your phone, so you want to make it easy. Then like Jane QA Abasa. That's an update method that you just did. That's a put method which has updated an existing data on your contact list. And then you save it and that is updated. I mean, it's as easy as so one thing about QA and then Postman and all of these things are things that we do daily that we could even apply to our daily life and living. Another method there is the patch method, which helps to update like patcher. Oh, so I made a mistake. The put method, what I described just now is a partial update because it's Jane bracket QA and then Abasa. So if you're going to totally replace my entire information, so you're changing the phone number, I got a new phone number and you were not aware. So when I met you, I'm like, oh, I got a new phone number, I want to share it with you. So you're going there to edit it totally. You're now updating it, changing my phone number and of course maybe my name, some part of the name. Yeah, that's an update, a put, which is an update method. Then we also have a method where we delete. So you have a data exist, you have like 20 Jane Abasa on your phone, and I've changed a lot of contacts along the way. My emails are different, and you want to delete some information. You just use the delete HTTP method. You pass in the data you want, the IDs, and of course, you can delete that information totally from the database. Okay, so yeah. For this, I'll just be showing us how a bit of like an API request to be in real time, right? So like I mentioned the other time, like I highlighted the body section of Postman where you have to enter like the body, the information that you're trying to create. You can see here there's something that talks about the request body. You're looking at the username, you're looking at the username, you're looking at the password, what you're trying to create. You're trying to create a new user. So yes, I'll use our mentorship program here as an example. When you are registering, you entered a couple of information. That means we're creating your data in a database, which is it. So you're entering your name, you entered your name. I want to know that you entered your name, you entered your phone number, you entered your email address, and you sent it, which means you saved it and we received it on our own end. So that is you carrying out a create method, right? You create functionality and that saves your data in the database. So this is just an example of the responses that you will get. Okay, let me see if I highlighted it there. Okay, I did not. But this part where at the bottom, after all of your request details are already at the top, where you have response. So every time you put in data, you get a response from the database, right? So this is just the sample response that you get when you create like a user. So you have your user ID specific to a particular user. If you put it in a category, you have all of this information being returned to you to tell you that this is what you have uploaded and this is the data that is being saved, that we know that is saved in the database, right? So next, I'll just discuss some HTTP codes and their responses and their meaning while we're testing. Whenever we carry out a create flow, so you registered for our mentorship program right now, that's the 201 created. Your resource has been created successfully. It now exists. You now exist. So Jane Abasa, Jane QA Abasa now exists on your contact. When you wake up in the morning and you're trying to fetch, you're selecting your contact list and then you're looking for Jane Abasa, that's a 200 OK request, right? That's the response that you get. We're trying to fetch the data. So the data exists and then we're fetching it back. So whenever you're fetching for any data while you're testing, you use a get request. Your 200, if you get a response code of 200, that's an OK. It means we found the data you were looking for. And of course, we're going to show you the data. This is your data that you've equally requested for. So I'm going to go to 204, which is no content. It means you're trying to search for a data that we don't have. We can't find it. So if you're putting a data that does not exist while you're testing, you're going to be getting errors like 204, no content. We can't find anything to return to you. So another sample code that you get is a 400 bad request. It means you're sending a request that is invalid. It means the system, your database will not recognize that type of request. So the it could be your format, it could be the way you've actually entered like a bracket. Sometimes it's as little as your bracket, your commas that you missed. You know that you should have passed in while you were testing. The database server will just return an error to use the bad request. I can't find it for my client. We can't find this particular kind of data. So you need to go back and reformulate your request and resend it, right? So if 401 unauthorized, it means your authentication has failed. That's it. You're no longer authenticated. Your token has expired. We need you to go generate a new token and all. So you get an error of 401 unauthorized. When you get an error of 403, 403 means forbidden. It means you do not have the required permission to carry out that action. So like, for example, when I talked about an admin trying to create like other users in the system, if I create a user, I've created me, Jane 1, and then I've created Jane 2, and Jane 2 does not have the permission to create. If Jane 2 tries to create, passing her own token, that error will come in 403 forbidden. You don't have this permission to carry out this particular action while you're testing. 404, which means not found. Just an example that's telling you, like, we can't find this resource. It doesn't exist. You're giving us the data that you're trying to fetch the data that does not exist at all in the database. Then 409, which is conflict. Okay, there's a bit of conflict in our current state of things. So just telling you that there's conflict. Just do something else with this particular request that you're trying to send. Then if you're getting an error of 500 internal server error, it means something has broken on the server side. So these are most of the common HTTP request code request. I mean, the ultra our testing using via API, using back Postman and even other form of API tools. These are the common status code that you get while you're testing. Yeah. So I will entertain questions now in case we're lost. I'm sorry. I know I try to keep it really simple. Just let me know when you don't understand something. You can go back to it and then we can discuss it. So I'll take questions now, please.